starting the. I'm starting the.
Hi everyone, this is John Palinkas. I'm one of the partners at CastlePointe. I'd like to welcome you to our free lunch webinar. Today's webinar is Becoming a 21st Century Leader. Our free webinar series is basically conducted every month, basically at noontime either Pacific or Eastern time. We alternate between the two. And it's a series of topics about IT transformation. Cultural change, organizational effectiveness, driving business value. These are highly focused 30-minute discussions, and we'd like to have discussions. So if you look on the left side of your screen, you'll see an area for Q&A for questions. And anytime during this session, feel free to type a question in there, and we'll leave about 5 minutes at the end for you to go over those questions and try to provide you with answers. They say there is no such thing as a free lunch, but there is for at least 2 of you on the call day. What we typically do is we have a $25 gift card to TGI Fridays. We'll be drawing those at random and awarding them to people. So again, today's webinar is Becoming a 21st Century Leader, what every IT professional must do to compete in the years ahead. And with that, I'll turn it over to Charlie Araujo. Please take it.
Thanks, John. And again, I introduce myself. My name is Charlie Araujo, and I'm the founder and president of CastlePointe. And I do thank you for joining us and welcome you. And I guess the first thing is I want to congratulate you because, well, you're here. And that mere fact alone kind of sets you apart because you understand a little bit about where this need is, or you kind of maybe see this gap developing about leadership in IT organizations. And we spent a lot of time talking about it, and this gap is starting to become apparent, and people are starting to understand that this is a real issue. And so one of the very first questions that we have to ask ourselves is, what does it mean? What is leadership, and what are we talking about? The first thing that we've got to understand is that leadership is not management. A lot of times, and I'm probably as guilty of it as anybody, we talk about IT leaders, and we inevitably think about the senior management team. But leadership is not management. Merely working for somebody or having someone work for you does not make you a leader. And I think part of the reason we do that is we want them to be leaders. We hope that they are, and in some cases, and in fact a lot of times they are. They provide those leadership skills. But leadership is not about telling somebody what to do and they go off and do it. Leadership is actually about creating inspiration and getting people who don't have to do anything that you tell them to do necessarily to want to do it, to want to kind of see the vision that you're putting forward. And so if we look at the great leaders kind of in history, and it doesn't have to be in history actually, in your own personal life, if you think of who you would view as one of your leaders, a great leader in your own mind and own world, almost inevitably they are never people that we worked for or that we're in some way compelled to follow. I think great presidents is a classic example of that. We always think of the president as a leader. He oversees the federal government. But if whoever you might think of as a great leader in presidential leader in history, it's almost never because you thought they did a great job of running the federal government. It's almost always because they inspired the nation, or at least a significant part of the nation, to see a vision that they had for where they could lead our country. And we often refer to our U.S. presidents as leader of the free world, and it is all about that influence and that ability to inspire. So I think with that as a foundation, we need to understand that if it doesn't matter if you're on this call and whether you have 1,000 people working for you or if nobody works for you, leadership is all about how you can inspire and guide others. So what does that mean then from an IT perspective? When we talk about IT leadership, what does that mean? Or as I may throw out here right now, what is the recipe then for IT leadership? Well, to begin with, there is a dash of leading the IT organization. So certainly if you have people that work for you, there should be an expectation, in fact I would say a duty, that you should have to lead them, not just to manage them, but to lead them, that you go into every day seeking to inspire them, to craft a vision for them, or for yourself really, that you're asking them to buy into, that they can see themselves in. And if you don't have anyone that works for you, that that you're going into that and seeing how you can inspire and guide your teammates, those people that work with you and around you, to see a vision that you might have. So there's certainly that part of it. But when we're talking about IT leadership, we might have that dash of leading within the IT organization, but really there's this heaping portion of inspiring and guiding your customers is really how we see this. That it is really about how you can help your customers understand how technology plays into their world and how it can be leveraged to create value. And we're going to talk about that in a lot more detail here, but I want to make sure we understand this, is that the future, when we talk about becoming that 21st century IT leader, it is really about leading your customers, much less about leading your staff or leading within the organization. Is about how do you lead your customers to a future, and most importantly to their future, to a future that they maybe don't even see yet, that you can help them identify that future and guide them to it. And that's really what we're going to spend some time talking about. And we've got, as we get a little deeper into this, we have 5 very specific skills that are probably not what you're thinking, that are the skills you need to become this kind of a leader, of someone that can help your customer, guide your customer down that road. So the first thing that we have to understand, though, as we go, is why are we here? What's going on? And I'm going to make, well, I don't know if it's bold or not, but here's my fundamental belief, is that the days of command and control from an IT perspective are dead. And if they aren't dead completely in your organization yet, they will be soon, because they cannot survive. If we kind of look over the history, and mind you, this was the structure that most IT organizations have operated under for years, of this kind of command and control, very hierarchical, project-centric kind of view, was needed. And this is not an indictment of our past. It was what was required when we began this journey. But as IT has grown over the years and has gone from crawling to walking, we are rapidly outgrowing this. And the reason is that, you know, when we started IT organizations, it was all about back office. It was all about automation and efficiency, and frankly, the business had no idea what IT was doing down there in the basement and didn't really care. As long as they could gain their efficiency and the dollars made sense, then it was all good. But that has dramatically changed over the last probably 5 or 6 years, where suddenly, or maybe 10 years now, with the internet and with the evolving consumerization of technology, it is front and center in every single business. And in fact, IT must now become or be at the center of every single business, truly, in almost any industry. And if it's not, that is a company that frankly is probably not going to be surviving very well, very long, because customers expect it, and it is just, you simply will not be competitive if technology is not front and center with your business model. And that means that the pressure on IT organizations is becoming exponential. And when you look at that kind of environment, it is very difficult to maintain this kind of command and control structure. It starts breaking down. It's just coming at it from too many sides. It's coming too fast that we can't maintain it with that command and control structure. And in fact, the business is really saying, you know, your business customers are saying, IT has to be fast and nimble, right? We can't, you can't continue to constrain it. We have too many things that we're trying to do, and if we have to work through this bureaucratic mess that is IT today, it's just not going to work. And it reminds me of this, of a line from Jurassic Park. I remember the book, but in the movie as well, where at the end of it, they thought they'd created this controlled environment where everything was perfectly managed. But nature, as I think Jeff Goldblum's character said, nature will find a way. And it's the exact same thing here. There are IT organizations that are desperately holding on to this command and control approach, but the business will find a way to get done what it needs to get done. And if that means going around the IT organization, outsourcing, using SaaS, using cloud, whatever it takes, they will find a way because the stakes are simply too high. And so what does that really mean then? And what does, I guess, maybe that have to do with this concept of becoming a 21st century IT leader? Well, here's the fundamental premise, because up to this point, you've probably heard most of this before. The problems that are starting to face IT organizations are fairly well understood. What isn't as well understood is what the answer is, or how you move past that. And so here's our fundamental premise, is that everyone in IT has to become an IT leadership rock star. Everyone has to step out of the dungeons that we've been living in, whether those are our technical dungeons or our process dungeons. If you're a ITIL, ITSM kind of person, it's still a dungeon. It's still, we live in our little myopic world focusing on IT. And that has to change, because the only way this is going to work, if our command and control structure breaks down, then what happens? That means every single person in the IT organization at every level has to be able to carry that conversation, has to be able to engage with the business and enable that business value at every single level. So the days of being able to have a technical domain or, again, a process domain, and this is all I do, and I wait for someone to give me the requirements and I go execute on it, those are rapidly going away. Because if you don't understand the business, if you do not crawl inside their heads and be able to come alongside and provide that leadership that they are looking for, if they're required to figure it all out on their own and simply give you the requirements, well, guess what? They can give those requirements to someone in India or China or Brazil just as easily. And so the only way that an IT organization and an IT professional is going to be able to continue to provide value in this economy and as things are changing is to take this leadership mentality, this idea that I have to look beyond the technical and instead focus on the business, focus on the value that what I'm doing provides from a perspective that they can understand. So in order to do that, there's 5 kind of key skills that really kind of make this up. And we're going to kind of talk through them briefly here. And there's a lot to them, and we've kind of already hinted at a few of them. But we want to step through these, and again, these are probably not going to be the kinds of things that you're used to hearing. And I'll, fair warning, the word process isn't in them. So the first skill is the ability to discern strategic value. And this is, I cannot simply overstate the importance of being able to do this. And it is something that routinely IT organizations are miserable at. IT folks are technical, they like playing with the technology, and translating that into business terms is something that is very difficult at times. McKinsey actually has an entire seminar on understanding business value, and their perspective is this, is that business value is created in only 2 ways: increasing revenue or improving the return on capital. That's it. And I actually wrote a blog post not too long ago on that seminar and try to break that down about how that might translate into a handful of technology type initiatives. But it is a real challenge. If you have to look at everything you do from that perspective and try to say, well, how is what I'm working on, how is it going to increase the revenue of the company? Or how is it going to improve the return on capital? Do you even know what return on capital is or how it's even measured? If you can't make those connections, then you're going to have a very difficult time making this transition, because that's the language that the business speaks. That's how they look at things, particularly from a management level. But everything at the end of the day gets translated into that. And then the second big question that you have to be able to ask yourself is, can you identify which of those technology elements add that value, right? Can you understand how your products contribute to that strategic value? Because when we look at things, and especially in large organizations, you're working in this very narrow technical space potentially. How can you connect the dots, right, between that technical nuance, that whatever it is, if you're a Unix administrator or you're a web developer, how do you connect what you do and the services and the products that you provide, even if you're providing to another organization within IT, to one of those 2 value points, or to however the organization is defining value? This is not an easy thing to do, and this is a critical skill, because if you can communicate at that level, if you can understand and discern how value is generated for the organization, then you can come alongside your customer and partner with them to drive that innovation. The second skill is one that, frankly, comes very difficult to many people in IT, and that is really, I mean, a whole bunch of things, coaching, mentoring, networking, coalition building, but it really comes down to developing people skills. Technical folks are, well, technical folks. They, you're probably in this business because you like playing with technology, you like what technology kind of brings to the table. I'm a geek like the rest of us. I get it. But the reality of it is that the business isn't. They don't look at it that way. And they're much more interested in the relationship and in understanding, and they don't really want to talk in technical terms. And so you have to work at building those relationships, both inside of the IT organization across the silos, but most importantly outside of the IT organization, with your customers, with your customers' customers. You need to look at yourself as their coach when it comes to technology. You need to view yourself as someone that is there to educate them and to guide them to how they can leverage the technology domain that you are the specialist in to create that value in whatever small way. And likewise, you need to view them as your mentor from a business perspective, right? Come in with a learning mentality of how you can educate yourself or have them help educate you on how that value is created, and most importantly, creative ways to extend that value. You need a network. There are so many IT folks that I know that spend their entire day, every week, every month, only talking to other IT people outside of, childhood friends or whatever. That's it, their entire world. You need to get out and you need to talk to folks in the business, outside of your business. And you also need to be talking to people maybe in IT, but at other organizations, right? You've got to broaden that out. And then you need to kind of bring all that together in this idea of coalition building and this concept of building these self-organizing ad hoc working groups. We love structure, and we want someone to tell us we're going to form this committee. But the most productive work gets done when you put together an ad hoc team without any formal blessing to simply make something happen. And this becomes particularly important if you're not, if you're not the CIO or part of the senior leadership management team. Because let's just say you're a DBA and you are doing these things, you're building these skills, and you're out talking to your customer, and you're connecting the dots between some technical aspect of how the database is architected, and you're seeing how that connects with if we were to fix something or change something or grow something or add something that it can generate or drive additional value. The odds are your piece of the solution isn't enough, that it's going to require more. So you have two choices. You can say, well, I guess that was a great idea, but I can't do anything about it because I don't control it. Or you can create one of these ad hoc, self-organized teams and form your own coalition where you bring people together to say, we have a shared customer, and we've identified here that this is a way that we can add value, and we're going to get together and solve this problem for them. That's a very different way of working than the way IT organizations work today. And clearly, you have to clear some hurdles organizationally at your top management levels. They have to start letting go to make this happen. But the truth of the matter is, it's going to start by folks in the organization learning these skills and doing this, proving that it works, showing results before the IT management team starts to let go of those reins. So this is a critical skill to be able to bring people together and to find those solutions and to create some agility, and we're going to talk more about that in just a second. The third skill that you really need here is this idea of product design, planning, product planning, and product management. And what's important here is that the fundamental approach of how an IT product or service gets developed and deployed is fundamentally flawed. And the approach that I think I take is you need to start thinking like a car company. And what I mean by that is that we don't really go and tell the car company, here's what my requirements are. They are out there in front of us, in fact, years in front of us, trying to identify what technologies, what designs, what aesthetics are going to create value or perceived value for me as a consumer, right? That's how they compete. And we need to be thinking in those ways, that we need to be projecting and anticipating our customers' needs in advance, not waiting for them to tell us what to do. And it's this idea of actually treating the service or product that we are producing as a product and putting it through a product development life cycle. And I don't mean an SDLC, right? I'm talking about how do you go from this design stage. And because in most organizations, it is limited to saying, tell me your requirements and I'll tell you how much it's going to cost. And that puts all the impetus or all of the burden on them to get it right. And that's our big complaint. Well, they couldn't tell us what they wanted. Well, I'm going to argue that the skill that is needed here is you need to help them figure that out. And you need to be able to understand the business well enough to help them anticipate that. And that leads us to the second point of this, which is embracing this idea of design principles. Industrial design concepts are tremendously powerful, and it's a tremendously powerful tool that IT organizations need to learn to harness, because industrial design is fundamentally focused on doing product design from the perspective of solving a problem. So when a designer comes to something, the very first question he says is, what problem do I need to solve? And then from that perspective, they start designing this product. And if you look at the way most IT organizations approach their product development, it is tell me what you need and I will go build it. And there's no problem identified in that mix, right? So we have to start with this idea of bringing in these design principles, of understanding that everything that the IT organization delivers to its customers has to solve specific problems. And if you cannot define the problem, or if the business is afraid to tell you, it means you've got some cultural hurdles that you have to clear. But you have to develop these skills where you start taking a product design, planning, and management approach to how you deliver your services, or you will always be behind, and eventually it is just as easy for them to take those requirements and give them to somebody else. The fourth skill is related to everything we've been talking about, which is marketing and communication, and probably more to the point, the real question is can you understand what business you're in? And I have kind of a pet peeve. I was actually listening to a presentation the other day, a good presentation, with this organization talking about how they define service levels. And they had this platinum, gold, silver kind of thing that we see at a lot of organizations. And, you know, it was around application resiliency and incident management response times, et cetera. And so if you had a platinum app, then it was fully redundant and we responded in an hour, kind of a drill. And on one level that made sense. But I was sitting there thinking that, you know, if I walked into a cell phone store, Verizon, AT&T, take your pick, and they offered me a cell phone, and they said, and which service plan would you like? Would you like the one that only drops, you know, 5 calls a month, or would you like the one that drops 20 calls a month? I would look at them and think, they're nuts. And I'd turn around and walk out the door. Who would deliver a service like that? And I think as IT organizations, we forget this. We fail to look at our services from the perspective of the customer and say, would you buy this service? Would you buy it this way? Is that what you care about? Now, I understand that we have to have the ability to measure that we don't necessarily want to build redundancy for every application. I get that. But understand that again, by putting this on the customer, saying, you pick the service, we're putting all the onus on them, as opposed to saying, we understand the business. We understand what your needs are. We're working alongside you as your partner, and we're going to deliver the service that's appropriate. And you're not going to have to decide that, oh, well, this one's platinum and this one's gold, right? So can you get to the point where you were looking at things and therefore then communicating in the business's language, that the services you are offering are being packaged and delivered from their perspective? And this can be tough, right? And so I often like to think of a service that, or a product that I might go acquire, and I love using cell phones as an example, and say, now if I were to offer if I was going to buy that cell phone service the same way I deliver my IT service, would I buy it? And if that answer is no, then you probably have a problem. And just to clarify this, sometimes people say, well, you can go look at a cloud provider, and they offer these little bands. Well, that's true if they're providing infrastructure, right? Because that assumes that the actual value delivered to the end customer of that's being mitigated along the way. So if you're an IT organization who is selling to other IT organizations where they're the ones making those decisions, then that might work. But in most cases, that isn't how it plays out. And instead, we end up going to our business customers and saying, well, tell us, do you want us to drop 20 or 50 calls this month? And it just doesn't really work. So we need to develop the skills to see things from our customer's perspective and to learn how to package and communicate from that point of view. And then the last skill, I know we're running out of time, the last skill that you need to develop if you're going to become this 21st century IT leader is to embrace this idea of continual optimization and innovation. And I love to use Apple as an example of this because they are the epitome of an organization that is leading their customers. In fact, they're leading an entire industry, really. And they're doing it not by coming to us and asking us what we want. They are distilling what we need before we know it, and they're delivering services and products that exceed the expectations of what we even thought we wanted. And whether you love them or hate them, the reality is that they are masterful at this process. And one of the things they do probably better than anything else is that they, are not afraid to ship a product in an early stage to get that initial stake in the ground. But the moment they've done that, they've already, a year before that first release, they've already started working on the next release. They are continually delivering things better, faster, cheaper on an ongoing basis. And if you compare that to the way most IT organizations function, it's the exact opposite. Most IT organizations put something out and every year it gets more expensive, gets more complex and less reliable. And it makes no sense. And it's because we stick it in, we think we're done. So we have to develop skills that say, and this, they all tie together, right? So product management says, I'm planning when I'm doing my product life cycle, I'm looking out 3 and 5 years, and I'm anticipating what those needs are going to be, and I'm beginning my development efforts now. I'm not waiting. And in fact, I'm going to make sure that if anyone's going to obsolete the services or products that we are providing to our customers, it's going to be us. Because if we don't, someone else is. And so we have to be looking at that from that perspective. We have to be continually looking at how we make it better, faster, cheaper. And this is why it kind of goes against this whole idea of the platinum, gold, silver thing, right? I'm setting a standard that is easy for someone else to compete with. If I come in and all I have to do is offer your customer that same service at a higher level of value, whether they say they required it or not, they're going to perceive that as greater value, and you're going to lose in that equation. So we have to develop these skills where it's not about being complacent or saying, well, we met your requirements. Look at, here's the metric. See how great I did? It's about continually looking at how we optimize it and how we continually obsolete our own services by driving innovation. All right, I know we're just about out of time, and there's, we could go on forever about this, but these are 5 critical skills, and they are really about fundamentally reframing the model by which we look at how IT organizations operate. And the last point I really just want to leave you with is this is right now. This isn't tomorrow. This isn't 10 years from now. This is happening right now. It started with outsourcing many years ago, but in the last few years we've seen the acceleration combination of the consumerization of technology coupled with things like SaaS providers and the cloud and all these things that are truly shaking the foundations that IT has been built on and has operated under. And we're going to see a lot of organizations where IT is just all but ceases to exist, that the business manages to outsource the vast majorities of it, and that's where it's going to go. And it's really up to you, to IT leaders, to figure out how to change that dynamic, because you have an intrinsic advantage over any outside competitor, and that is you live inside the business. Your customers are you. You are a part of that business. And so you should be able to understand the business and understand the customer's needs and anticipate them better than anyone on the outside ever will. But it requires you develop these skills, that you practice these skills, and you put them into place. And if you do that, and if you look at things differently, then there's a great future in store. So that is what we wanted to cover today. I think very briefly, and I know John will jump in here with some questions, but just our quick little commercial. If you don't know who we are, we help IT leaders transform their organizations with a set of services like organizational adoption, metrics, leadership development, program execution. We also, and probably most importantly, we produce a lot of content that is out there. You can follow me on Twitter. Here's my contact information. Our blog is out there, published most days, and we produce a whole bunch of videos. These webinars are all on demand, white papers and articles that are all out there, pretty much, well, no, they're all free to download and continue this journey. So hope this was enjoyable, and we'll answer some questions here.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. So one of the questions was, is this recorded and will I be able to access it? And the answer is yes. If you look at the Ideas and Insights section on the bottom of the slide, it has a URL. If you go to that URL, you can basically download any of the white papers, any of the articles. You can replay and listen to any of the webinars, not just this one, but any of the webinars that we've done. So that's available. Another question.
That should be tomorrow, I think.
I'm sorry?
I think that will be out there tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's usually a 24 or 48-hour delay, so we need a little time to process it and put it up. But all the prior webinars are available. We have a question. How IT folks get involved in vertical to gain 5 skills required to become an IT leader? And sort of a related question that I had seen was one that says, how are you supposed to become a 21st century leader if your boss is from the 18th century? So I think they kind of relate, so I'll turn that over to you, Charlie.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the first thing, and I actually meant to hit on this, and I kind of I missed it, but is that this isn't evolution. I mean, as much as I want to create a sense of urgency that this is happening right now, which it is, it's also something that's going to evolve over time, right? No organization is going to make rash decisions. And so there's opportunity here, and this is the perfect time to begin making these inroads. The short answer there, in terms of if your IT management doesn't get it, if they are, as you said, from the 18th century or whatever, is that you can do a lot of this beneath the covers. A lot of this by, we talked about building these ad hoc coalitions. You can do that. It happens all the time, right? It just normally happens at a technical level. You can do it at a business level by focusing it. Sometimes you get resistance about, well, we don't want you network engineer talking to the business, quote unquote. You need to start, fighting that battle and making sure that people understand it. If nothing else, I think there's lots of opportunity for the water cooler talk to just put yourself in a position. One of the things that I used to do is when I ran an IT organization, I would literally just go spend a day camped in an area of one of my customers and just take up a conference room or find a cube, and I would work from there. But for the sole purpose that I would start interacting with people that weren't in IT, and I start understanding, or schedule meetings. I mean, there is sometimes a cultural issue that you have to overcome, but I don't want to. There's definitely a possibility you get an IT manager who just says, absolutely not, and frankly, you might want to look elsewhere, because if they are that far back and that stringent and that buried in the sand, then they're going to have a lot of issues, and you have to decide if you want to fight that battle or not. And in terms of getting these skills, there's a lot of organizations, and this does require management support, but there's a lot of organizations that have like rotation type services, and most of them have done it the other way, right? Again, wonderful IT perspective. Well, the problem is the business doesn't understand IT, so we'll rotate business people into IT so they understand it. I don't know that provides that much value, but I think if you are able to establish a program where you spend time working with the business, I think it's critical. We spend a lot of time working in healthcare right now, and the most successful organizations in terms of doing electronic health record adoptions are those organizations that have taken their IT analysts and put them on the hospital floor. And by moving them out of those areas, they're able to build empathy with the patients. They're able to build camaraderie with the nurses and the doctors, and it completely changes their perspective. And sometimes you just need to remind IT management that this is a critical part of that process, but it's normally not that hard because it's kind of instinctive. People get that. They just don't think about it. And so you simply have to ask sometimes that I want to go do this, and I want to go spend some time working with them in that area and be able to get to know that side of the business and use that as an opportunity to develop some of these skills.
So with that, we've run a little bit over, so we want to thank you for your indulgence and for listening, and hope you'll join us again next month for our next webinar. So thank you, everyone.